Welcome to Ancient Astrology with Sam and Verity.
Hi, I'm Sam Bakewell.
And I'm Verity. And today's episode 17, and we will be delving into some questions.
We're doing Q&A today.
Yeah. Fun. So
we've had some viewers who have asked us questions, and some students have asked questions over the years also. And Verity has things on her mind that she'd like me to answer. So we're going to get through as much as we can, and then we might have to do another Q&A later on down the track.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's good to have you at my
Becking call.
Yeah, my becking call.
Just finished recording the quadruplicity.
Yeah.
The very flexible Pisces rising.
Yeah. All right. So the first question comes from me, and I've just been very curious about the 12th house because I think it's something that, it even just by description of it, it's quite vague, and it's sort of like, yes, there's like the isolation and things like that, but then there's all that kind of underneath sort of things, secrets or fogs or things you don't see or you don't know about happening. So I will be approaching a 12th house year soon. Well, not soon, in a couple of years time. Yeah, but I'm already kind of thinking about it.
But your experience for your last 12th house year, which would have been 23?
Yes, I was correct? 23, and I reflect on that time a lot because it was actually a very big year in my life. But at the time, when I reflect back on all the changes that was happening to me and all the big events that were happening to me, but it was like I was like in a fog, and I didn't realize I was until after, because I reflect back on that time now, because the choices that I made at that time had a huge effect on my life still to this day, and I didn't grasp the reality of it at the time. It was like I didn't see what big moments these were, and I didn't think I was isolated, but now I look back and I think, yeah, I definitely was. It was like I really went into like a cocoon of myself, but I didn't even know that was happening at the time. So it's kind of like, not only to me does it seem like you can go through those themes, but it's almost like I wasn't even aware that I was doing it or experiencing it until I came out the other side and reflected on it. And even now, I think it's taken probably 10 years to reflect on it more. Yeah. So
well, now that you're studying astrology seriously, I guess, you also reflect on various years to see how that is manifested in your life.
Yes.
So
yeah, because they were big events. So then, of course, you see, I was in my 12th house then. And I think,
look, I've had lots of people who have said something about their 8th house and been very frightened about going in their 8th house. So some houses are like the 12th house and the 6th house and the 8th house are particularly negative houses. So totally understand why people feel nervous about going through those houses, but it really is about the lords of that area. So I have Verity's chart up here, and so she was in a Jupiter-Venus time frame, and by perfection, this was, I could say, age 23, because I know that the first house is age 24, and so we haven't really delved into the art of prediction. However, some people are going to be advanced astrologers listening to this show, and others will be intermediate, and even for the ones that are just learning, then this is still something that that you could strive towards.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking at, because at age 23, you've entered the 12th house. So we still have to say the 12th house, what the 12th house topics and what the 12th house represents. So it'd still be saying sickness and self-undoing and medical centers and things like that, right? So I still have to use that because it's still a 12th house year.
And those
But-
were relevant.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So firstly, Jupiter does not see this house, right? So
Yes.
so you've just come not long from this Sag house. So it's very different. Your eyes are wide open and you can see everything that's happening. And Jupiter can connect with its other fire sign, but it can't connect to this house because this is the 6th house here. So it's a 7th across there and it falls in the 6th house.
Yeah.
So I always find that when the planet is an aversion, so you still have to tell the native all about the 5th house matters and all the aspects that Jupiter makes. So I'm concentrating on Jupiter, and I would be saying a lot of beneficial things, you know, about the 5th house and some fun and romance and group activities and holidays and things like that, right? So I'll be talking about that.
Yeah, they all
but
happened.
I always find that when a house is in inversion, and I have it myself for different houses, so I won't go through that because that just could confuse the viewers. And it's a letdown. It's a bit of a letdown, you know, because you're not getting everything you want, especially when you know astrology and a planet is an aversion and you think, oh, great, it's Jupiter year, 10th house year, this is going to be great. But when Jupiter is an aversion to that 10th house, it's a bit like, is that all that was? You know, it's not as fantastic, right? But it's still Jupiter. And it's still going to create some benefits. And you do have a Venus-Jupiter sextile, so this is a very lucky thing to have. The other lord is Venus, so it would have been an easy year for me to predict for, because we have Jupiter and Venus, and whether I read it with Jupiter first and then Venus, or Venus and Jupiter, I'd still be incorporating those planets, and I'd be incorporating the house that it's in, where it's located, and then I would start telling you this story of what I expect is going to happen. And this opposition it's always painful to have an opposition, especially with Saturn, because it delays things and it makes you wait. And it makes you work a bit harder. You know, you might not have felt that you were getting what you wanted out of that year, even though, you know, there's love, there's romance there. Venus is not in a sign that it's working with it, you know, so it's not like an easy kind of romance and all the rest of it, you know, what Venus stands for. But it's still very creative. It's still about romance. It's still about children or having children, or the fun, or the 5th house, and the 9th house, study, travel, getting advice from professionals as well. So it still would have been a very good time frame with things happening for you. However, you know, we just had the episode on quadruplicity, and so you being a cardinal sign, you just want things to happen like boom, 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 boom. Let's go, let's make it happen. So now you're experiencing the common and fixed side, and it may not necessarily all be you. You know, it could be somebody else. It could be your siblings. You know, it could be your partner, and it could be that fixed would be more the Jupiter people. So it would be the 5th house people. It's also about your health. So, you know, you could have had hip problems. You know, Venus is also rules the kidneys and a lot of other things, but we won't get too personal on this topic.
I did have medical things that haven't happened again since. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, it actually makes a lot of sense to see it playing out like that.
So it wasn't tough, but sometimes it can be a letdown when that house doesn't see the lord of that house. So it can see Venus. Venus is fine.
It was almost like, I guess, the typical kind of stereotypical Pisces 12th house thing. Like, I did sort of see the world that year with rose tinted glasses, and then it was like they got taken off the year after, and every year after that.
Yes. Well, that's what happens when you've got a Caden Peregrine planet, unless it's in terms or decan.
But I did still get some lovely things out of it.
Yeah.
And things that I guess catapulted my life in a different direction to what led me here. So you can't ever look at things and say something was bad, because it always leads you to where you are now. Yeah.
There's a reason.
Exactly.
Reason for it.
It was just a very when I look back at it, pivotal kind of catalyst year.
Well, not everybody's going to have a difficult 12th house year. Like our native who has Jupiter in the 12th house in Scorpio, and the Sag rising, Jupiter in the 12th. That's going to be a very good year for her. Although the Mars will play out as, because it's in the 11th house, so that would be some bullying and aggressive kind of behavior from friends and cutting friends off and having problems with friends. However, Jupiter, that's where she's placed. So for a time in her life, she's actually going to get what she wants, because that's the house that she's experiencing, and that's where she is. So that would be still a relatively good year for her, because she can ask for what she wants. She can put out her wishes. She might be able to travel, do a course of some sort, all the things that she wants to do that are Jupiter inclined.
Interesting.
So not everybody is going to have even if somebody had Saturn in that house, if it's in pretty good condition, let's say it's in Libra, it's in its joy. So then they would have Venus and Saturn. So there would be some Saturn issues that will come with that, because Saturn, if it's Saturn, especially your malefic of sect, so it's still going to play out, but there's some benefit because Saturn is in its joy there, and it would be in Libra, it would be exalted. So it really depends on the chart, always looking at the cusp lord.
Thank you. You really helped me to demystify that a lot. Yeah, it's helped it make a lot more sense.
Okay, what's the next question, darling girl?
Appreciate that. Okay, let's see. So then we've got some other questions here from different people. This one says the first house is interesting. It can have quite sort of basic descriptions. Yeah, so I see what that means, like such as body and identity. Is there more to the house, and is it always a positive perfection time?
Okay, so the first house is the most important house, because it is you, it is the native. And when we were going through that quadruplicity chart, the last lesson of episode 16, we were talking about, the ascendant, and even with a cardinal sign, with the Libran rising and with the two lords in the 6th house, they'll still be facilitators, and people will still look up to them to lead. So that's how important it is, because it still is a massive part of who you are, who that native is. Once again, it will depend on where those lords are, whether they have a good year or great year or not so great. But most people that I know will have wherever that is placed. So let's put me up, right? Can't pick on you all the time. Okay, so let's say I'm going through a first house. I will be in a few years' time when I turn 60. I still have Saturn there. Saturn is my malefic of sect, right? This is who I am. I am a Pisces rising. I am Jupiter, and I am Venus. I am all those houses that are ruled by those planets, and I'm Saturn as well. So makes for quite a complex person when you have so many planets that are part of who you are. So I could be responsible, and then it's retrograde, it's in Pisces, and then I can go, well, I don't want to be responsible anymore. I'm just going to wag the day. That's an Australian terminology if you're not Australian. I'm just going to do nothing today and just waste the day. So, but most of the time, because it's so close to my ascendant, I am very responsible. And that can cause some problems because it is retrograde. So that's another added debility to it. But it is in the first house, so it adds benefits. So it does give these benefits to me. The house is important because it is who you are. It is the native. So that's the place that we start. How they drive this body and make the most of their life depends on their planets, because some people aren't going to have much of an option, or they are just happy with just their routine life, going to work, and they're not going to keep achieving and trying to run their own business, and others will, right? So that would be ascendant, and those lords are going to tell you about that. Any aspects to that ascendant are going to be equally important. So I also have Mercury that opposes it, the sun opposes it, Jupiter also trines my ascendant, so these are all gifts as well.
Yes.
An opposition might be something where I'm saying, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in the limelight. Also, I feel compelled because an opposition to your ascendant or the Lord of your ascendant it's compelling you. You just have to go with it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, having an opposition as well. Yeah. And it's like different things will activate it maybe. So for you having it being the Sun and Mercury opposing Saturn, maybe it's like hard work, but you still want to do it anyway.
Well, if you knew me a few years ago before I started astrology, and even when I started astrology, you would not have thought that I was a person that was going to be doing my own podcast or doing our podcast.
Yeah.
To stand in front of the public. And even when I first started doing, I did a couple of workshops. Well, the first two that I did for astrology for the Federation group, I was terrified. I was shaking like you wouldn't believe. And of course, you know, I've got a Sun-Saturn opposition, right? So anything that's dealing with this ascendant or any of the lords of the ascendant is a big deal for the native, you know, because that's who they are. It's how they experience things, you know. So I was shaking, and one of the girls from work came. I said to her, did you notice how nervous I was? She said, no, didn't see it at all. She said, you know, you just looked so confident, knew what you were talking about, blah, blah, blah. I was shaking. I was that, and I thought it was coming through my voice because I was so nervous, and I couldn't wait to, and I felt like it was a blur because I just wanted to get off. That's what it was all about, getting off stage.
I've experienced
So that's how important that first house is. It's a big, big deal, you know. Yeah. So does that answer your question or the viewers' question?
Well, yeah, for me, I reckon that's really a great example, actually, your chart. It's very cool. Yeah. Yeah, hopefully that answered the question. I think that was well done. Okay, next question.
Question Venus, the first house. All right, I've done that.
Question 3. Okay, so this one's on planets. So we did planets a little while back.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
This one's on Saturn. So is it possible to have a positive or easy time if you are in a Saturn year or month?
If Saturn isn't your malefic of sect, yes, you could have an easier time. If Saturn is in Aquarius or in Capricorn, you might have an easier time. But Time Lords are very specific, right? So like if you had, so Time Lords are clocks, basically. So if you had one clock that says Saturn time frame, and then you have like, let's say perfection, then you have another clock, you know, let's say it's your Vidaria. And let's say you even have your Saturn return, right? So there's another clock. So there's 3 clocks, but there are many clocks that we use. And so if they all are measuring up to Saturn, well, then that's going to be a big Saturn year. So whatever Saturn represents in your natal chart is going to manifest, is going to play out for you, right? If you have Saturn in Aquarius, or Capricorn, it's going to be a little bit better. It's like, let's say Saturn is in Capricorn in the 2nd house, and it is the malefic of sect for the native, right? So Saturn Capricorn can be wherever it rules. So it would rule the 11th house, and it would rule the 3rd house. So there is that could be the company's money or through a friend. So that would be because it's Capricorn, Saturn and Capricorn, it still gives that native a favor. And let's say it's in nocturnal chart, so it's still going to play out as a negativity, as something. So it could be like a redundancy. So you still have all this money,
you have to like find a new job.
Exactly. But it was your dream job, and you know, but they've told you that they don't need you anymore, basically. But it's a legitimate problem. Now, let's say we have Saturn in that setup, but it's retrograde, which is a debility, then, and it's a nocturnal chart, well, then it's a bigger loss of money. So there can be big problems with finances during that Saturn time frame, especially when Saturn is by perfection, by Vidaria, by transit, just like I mentioned, you know. So there's the universe is basically saying, look at Saturn. Saturn is very serious this time, and it is going to come out with a big whammy, right? And not all of us are going to go through something like that. So, all right, so let's put up my chart again, and I'll pick on me again. Let's have a look. So I've got a Peregrine Saturn, right? So it's retrograde. It's not fantastic. So the following year, next year, I'll be going into a Capricorn year. So I'll have Saturn and Mars. And the second house for that year will be Aquarius. So this is not going to be very good for my finances. And so my finances will go onto my health. And each time I go through a Saturn year, it's can be quite tough, you know, and Saturn rules my 8th house as well. So there's some health issues starting to play out. It's my friend's house, so it's all about my friends as well. It's about their finances. It's about all the 12th house issues, and it's all about 8th house. So without having to sit here and delineate my whole chart, you know, for that following year, yeah, it's not going to be totally fun. But I do have another planet that rules that area, so that's Mars also. Looking at it, it's already a bit like
I know, but
2 malefics for the year. We are concerned when we go through those time frames. However, you know, I have lived that
yeah, you know, you've been through
that
it before. You've survived.
Yeah, exactly. And I survived. That's right.
I know.
Probably
Yeah.
another tooth will be coming out, I'd imagine. Probably another sprained ankle will happen.
Sometimes I find people with diurnal charts, I'm like thinking, oh, you know, they're going through their Saturn return or something to do with Saturn, and I don't really see anything happen to them. Well, big, like a big whammy, like you. Yeah, you did it.
Well, they have there's a different purpose for them. It's about severing ties, ending relationships, ending things. So if they had Mars in the 10th house, and they've got to end their career, you know, so another career starts, or their boss, their favorite boss leaves, or, you know, or they argue with their boss. So it's a very different type of setup, you know, for the diurnal charts. And some people have both malefics, you know, and doing something to each other, square and opposition.
Yeah,
so
or the same house, like it could be Capricorn, but it's got Mars in there.
And ideally we do want those malefics in cadent houses, you know, not all fortunate enough to have it that way, but because then they don't play out, you know, they're weak.
All
those planets are weak.
Very true.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
We might have time for one more question.
All right, cool. Let's have a look then. What about, all right, maybe this one, because there's a lot going on at the moment with Jupiter soon.
Okay. Yep.
Well, this one's just, I might have my own little question to tack on to the end of it.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, this one is just, is Mercury or Jupiter a better indicator of financial matters such as money and income?
Well, like if I was looking at mundane, and I was looking at my transit book, my ephemeris, and I was predicting what was going to happen with the world, I'm looking at Mercury as a different form of what, like Jupiter is the wealth of the world by transit, you know, with the ephemeris. Mercury is more about banks and the money, you know, feeling the money, touching the money, internet banking, things like that. So like, because I follow the synodic cycle of Jupiter and Saturn, and I'm looking at the wealth of the world, and when we have our ups and we have our downs, you know, so I'm assessing
sort of impact other
that
things,
for
don't they?
Well, I'm assessing it for the global wealth.
Yes.
And when Jupiter goes into Gemini, I'm looking at, which is in a couple of days.
Yeah, that's what
I'm looking at. Yeah, by the time the viewers get to see this, it's well and truly in Gemini. But you know, I'm looking at a decline in at least a few countries, but not all countries, because we're in the incline. So you know, Jupiter is more about the wealth of the world. Like if you're looking at your natal chart, I'm definitely looking at the second house for money, right? So on a personal level, I'm not like I'm ruled by Jupiter, And wealth is always on my mind. You know, wealth, travel, spirituality is always a fair constant for my way of thinking. So, you know, positive affirmations and things like that are a big part of who I am. And but somebody else that's not ruled by Jupiter might not be thinking that way, you know. Then like somebody like yourself is more about action orientated and doing things and getting things done and achieving and a lot more than that, because you know you have Mars in Cancer. There's a lot of family stuff and a lot of home things going on as well. But Mercury for money in your natal chart. So I suppose I might say something about Mercury with money, but only if it happened to be the month that the native was in. And let's say somebody had Mercury in Sagittarius, right? So I do a chart for monthly readings for that. So that's a detriment Mercury. And I would be really concerned when she goes into those months, if it's doing something to her 8th house, because it's other people's money, and it's also, to me, it's a bank, and Mercury is a bank, and Mercury does rule money. So I would be saying something to her about watch out about your internet banking, and when you go into banks, watch out for fraud, credit card fraud, somebody trying to steal your name. I would be saying something like that, especially in a Mercury year. I'd also be saying things that Mercury rules, like cars, you know, like incidents with cars, you know, things like that. So yes, so I would be using Mercury more for money and movement of money, and Jupiter about wealth. And okay, so I am thinking wealth for money, but
is it more sort of an opportunity, like wealth in the sense of it can come in different ways? Like sometimes you look at your life and you just feel very abundant because you've got this, you know, you've got a house and you've got friends and you've got food, and it's not really a sense of how much money is in the bank, but just a feeling of, and that more is to come, instead of feeling like a lack and feeling that anything is
that is Jupiter. Yeah. And you know, I wouldn't say Jupiter for money though. You know, I'd be saying Jupiter.
And I know that different ways, like it could be a friend being generous and giving you a free TV, or if you needed one and then your friend's got a spare one, so they just give it to you. It's kind of more like things happening that help
you know, so like I've predicted for people like that. So when they have a debilitated Jupiter, let's say, and but they still are really lucky. So let's say it's a Jupiter year, or Jupiter's in their 2nd house for the year, then I'd be thinking, and let's say it's retrograde and it's in Scorpio, you know, so it hasn't got a great deal going for it, but it's in a good area, or, you know, or it just happens for that year. So, you know, I'd say something like, you might be given something, or you find, you know, when you go somewhere, you find this great thing, you know. So one example of a client who found a coloured TV that was in perfect condition, that hadn't been used, that was in a box in a dumpster.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but not in the dumpster, like on the side of the dumpster. So picked up this great big coloured TV and took it home, plugged it in, and it worked like a dream. So something like that, you know, would be expected from, so that's a kind of wealth, you know, but it's not money. It's not money orientated. Sometimes wealth can be wealth of knowledge, you know, wealth of other things as well. But, you know, when I'm looking at the wealth of the world, I am looking at the income of the world, you know, how are we in deficit, or are we?
And in a way that kind of reflects like standard of living of the world, doesn't it? With that big scale, it kind of, because I guess when, you know, there's issues with the economy, then, you know, can fall into depression, and then that affects people's day-to-day living. So it's kind of that bigger, like we were saying before, with the quadruplicities, Jupiter is kind of that bigger picture, whereas Mercury is the, you know, the detail, like the banking, the transactions, the small, the money in your hand.
And you know, what I like about Jupiter is that it can handle a lot of grunt, or a lot of debility to it, where Mercury can't handle anything. It's very fragile. So that's how fragile the finance can be. You know, like money can be.
Quick.
Okay, so I think we're out of time, basically, or answered a few questions. We have more questions, but we
Always.
might do another episode and down the track, you know, on Q&A episode later on.
If you have any questions, please feel free to message us or comment them below. We love them. They're great.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe and like.
Thanks.
And we appreciate your comments. Bye for now.
Bye, thanks.